democracy. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business. And I have chosen you to preach this evangel.
For all my free market healthcare robbing, stock stealing, retirement fund fucking with niggas. Fuck you little credit card scamming, jewelry stealing, crack selling, liquor store robbing motherfuckers. Shout to the homies, Carnegie, OG, Willie Randolph Hearst, Baruch, Rockefeller, the real Rockefeller, my main bitch Leona, pour out a little Louis the 13th. Scott Rothstein, Jack Abramoff, hold your head. My real top niggas, let's get this money. I spend my day pimping America overseas. Pension for the workers, nigga, please. Embezzlement, etiquette, private settlement. I'm better with Confederate rhetoric from my mansion in Connecticut. Foreclosure, Vic homes out of tenement. I twist words like a speech impediment. I hope you got good credit, bitch. If not, better get a new job with benefits. While I play golf with niggas to get cheddar with. New money buys brand new carrots. My old money bunch of great grandparents. You got grills in your mouth, I ain't mad at you. I own every gold mine in South Africa. Thanks, baby, you made me $1 billion. Plus, I own a building for each one of my children.
Your host, Chris J. And we are waiting for Payday Monsanto to call in. He has not called in yet, but he is an independent artist. Does a lot of songs against the New World Order and the current, best way to call it, corporatist system that we live in today in the modern-day United States of America, and talks about a lot of the key players in this New World Order. That song right there, I think, is one of his best ones, Tel Aviv Steve, and it was about Israel, and right now Israel has been in a ruthless bombing of Gaza for now somewhere close to a month. About more than 1,000 Palestinians, most of them innocent civilians, have died in this conflict, and about, I believe, only 50 Israelis have been killed in this conflict, and most of them were soldiers, which is actually higher than usual. I mean, in 2008-09 conflict between Israel and Palestine, there were about 1,300 Palestinian casualties, I think, and about 13. I think only 13 IDF died in that. So they were killing. They were killing one IDF per 100 Palestinians killed in that conflict, and they weren't. This is pretty much genocide. It's the same thing practically now, but I think that they are standing up to themselves to at least a degree. And if you knew the situation on Israel and Palestine, you'd think that shooting a rocket back at Israel would be justified, considering that the Israelis stole their land, keep them behind a walled prison practically that is Gaza. There's no way out. If you looked at the map, Israel blocks one border, and then the other border is Egypt, and Egypt's not allowing people through. Al-Sisi is doing a very bad move by only letting very few Palestinians cross the border, and they have to be injured. And these injured Palestinians, when they get a doctor, when the doctors come to them, they won't let the doctors come to take care of the Palestinians. So they have no medical care when the Palestinians get to Egypt, or a lack of medical care because they won't let any doctors treat them. Or any that are flown in. I guess they just have their local doctors or whatever, but it's definitely not enough to take care of the flood of Palestinian injured. When I said 1,000 casualties so far, so it's actually 1,000 fatalities. Make that clear. 1,300 fatalities also last time. There's a lot more people getting injured too. There's hospitals full with injured patients, and one person working at one of these Palestinian hospitals that are, that have many of your children there have suffered smart bombings and all kinds of stuff from Israel. I've said, Obama, if you want to continue to support Israel, I suggest you go to this hospital and see what your support of Israel is causing. And actually, Israel has, I would say it's the other way around. Israel supports the United States. Unfortunately, Israel has controlled the United States. Or, well, not total control, but they have a lot of control over the United States because they do have the biggest lobbying group in America, the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee. Don't listen to those gun grabbers and stuff like that. They often like to put out a false piece of information that the National Rifle Association, aka the NRA, is the biggest lobbying group in America, but that's certainly not true. It is actually AIPAC, and AIPAC via that have frankly the United States Army used as their pawns practically to go fight in wars for the Israeli government. And the Israeli government, I don't even think the Israeli government really even represents the will of the people there. A lot of these Israelis want peace with Palestine. They don't want war. And a lot of them do not want to be killing these little children in Palestine. Many do not want to join the IDF, but they're forced to. And if they don't join the IDF, there's only one exception. They're able to not join the IDF is they're super Orthodox Jewish, I think. Ultra-Orthodox Jewish, I think, is the only exception. Besides that, you're forced to, even if you're a woman. All women are forced to at threat of prison. And there's people that serve in prison right now that will not, no matter what, join the IDF because they know what it will lead to. Them having to do very immoral actions over in Palestine and over in West Bank and Gaza. With this right now is in Gaza, and the casualty rate is so alarming because it's already 1,000 fatalities have died, or 1,000 people have died, and there's with 1,000 fatalities on the Palestinian side, it's only been 1 month. This has been so far not too long a conflict, but it's already been 1,000 fatalities, according to several reports, including from RT.com, and I think that they're coming from observers on the ground who have seen the carnage. And it's not what the Israeli propaganda that Hamas is using people as human shields. That's not true. The truth is that the truth is that they're not using them as human shields. In fact, some Israelis have used, there's other ways around it. Israelis are using people as human shields, Palestinians that they've captured. And that the truth is Palestine has just been suffering these huge amounts because Israel is indiscriminately bombing them. And Hamas has supposedly this, terrorist organization. And these rockets are mostly, it looks like mostly directed at soldiers, as only soldiers have died. I mean, the only fatalities on the Israeli side are mostly all soldiers, IDF, civilians in Israel, but soldiers. Unlike Palestine, most of them are not Hamas. Most of the fatalities are civilians, and a lot of them are children. Men, women, and children are dying in Palestine, and the world turns a blind eye. Payday Monsanto is very much against what is going on in Israel. He makes it quite clear, or what's going on in Israel/Palestine. It's really Israeli-occupied Palestine. But he makes that clear on his Facebook page. And the songs that he writes, I mean, he has made, he's done his activism in favor of the Palestinian people that have been long repressed by the Palestinian people have been long repressed by the Israeli government since the 1940s now. I mean, this is a 7-decade-long era of repression in Palestine. These are people that, these are great-grandchildren, of the people that were there when the British Mandate happened, and then after Israel was recognized as a state by the UN, but most of the world that does not really, I think 2/3 of the world does not recognize Palestine, does not recognize Israel as a state. Palestine is recognized by 2/3 of the world. Most of the world, besides the United States and a few European countries, recognize Palestine as the state that should be there and that piece of land. And it looks like we do have a caller from Payday Monsanto. Should be this caller. And let's see.
Chris,
you're alive.
I'm going to need a moment. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great, man. Yes, and do we have Payday Monsanto? I told you it wouldn't take too long for him to call in. And
yeah, I'm running a little
great
late.
To have you on. It's great to have you on the show again. and we've had you before on the show. I had you about 3 months ago, I remember, and it was a great show. And
absolutely. Well, I'm going to listen in for a little bit. I'm going to go make myself something to eat. I'm starving. I just got in the door a little while ago, so I'll listen in a little while, and give me 20 minutes.
Well, that's great. That's great, man. Yeah, you can go eat, come back in a little bit, and we'll just fill in some time into there.
Very quickly,
yes.
as quick as possible.
Okay, good, man.
All right.
Yes, so that was just what you heard right there. That is Payday Monsanto, and he's a little busy right now. He's going to call in. Oh, he's going to be listening in for a while, and then he will talk later. So just stick around here on the show. I was talking about the Israel-Palestine conflict, and it's tragic. It's absolutely tragic. Every few years or so, there seems to be another conflict on that Israeli well, it's kind of, I mean, there's two countries there that claim to be the legitimate country there, but I believe one Palestine's the legitimate country. But in Palestine, or Israeli-occupied Palestine, there's always conflicts every couple of years, but this one's big. I mean, this one is the biggest one in 5 years, and there was a smaller one back about fall 2012 where Israel and Palestine clashed. But about, I think, around 0809 was the war, where there was chemical weapons used by the Israeli army. They used white phosphorus on the Palestinian people, and then when they go in 2013, accusing Bashar Assad, who did not use chemical weapons, and they found out that was a Saudi black op, that whole chemical weapon use by the Syrian army. They found out that was not true. Later, it's kind of hypocritical for Israel to be accusing people of chemical weapons when they've actually used chemical weapons before on innocent people, the Palestinians who lost 1,300 in that conflict. Then this looks like it's going to be bloodier than the last one. This looks like it could be, I mean, if things don't start to settle down quickly, this could be the next big war there. This could be 67 all over again. Hopefully not with the same result as 67 with an Israeli victory, but it could definitely be a 67 where a total clash between the Palestinians and the Israelis. But here's the thing. The Palestinians do not have a standing army of their own. They have Hamas, but that's not really a military. That's all they have defending them right now. There's no countries coming in to intervene. 67, many countries came in to intervene, including Egypt. That was a major one, who was under President Nasser at the time, and Nasser was a legitimate leader, I believe. He was the mentor for Muammar Gaddafi. He mentored Muammar Gaddafi. Muammar Gaddafi really looked up to Nasser when he was younger, and that's when Gaddafi came to power in Libya. There was many other countries that came in, Arab countries that came to the aid of Palestine in 67. And the United States was almost lured into the war via a false flag that the Israelis tried to do. It was called the USS Liberty, a ship that was out there. And then the Israelis attacked it, and then when they sunk the boat, there were still people in the water, and then they came back and strafed the people that were in the water. And then they were going to blame it on the Arabs around there, Egypt, and trying to get the United States with Israel against the Arabs that are coming to protect the Palestinians. And the good thing is, the Russians watched it happen, and I think that's what stopped the false flag from happening. The Russians have witnessed what was going on. They were the main witness that would call Israel on their bullshit. They were trying to push on the American people by trying to get them into a giant Arab-Israeli war. And this Arab-Israeli war, I mean, it was pretty big. And with the United States on one side, that could open up, things for other powers to join in against, it could turn into a possibly a third world war then. Everybody should remember the USS Liberty. And they try to say that the Israelis try to justify saying it was a spy ship the United States had sent out there. We had to do it, okay? That's bullshit. because they were trying to blame it on the Arabs. The Arabs didn't do it because they just didn't do it. It was Israeli aircraft that hit the ship. And the real story is Israelis did it, tried to blame it on the Arabs, and they were unsuccessful because somebody witnessed it, a.k.a. the Russians. So, you can thank the Russians for in 1967 for, I guess, saving us from a gigantic cataclysmic war in the Middle East. Because I know it's like, it wasn't that big, the Middle Eastern powers, Israel was able to handle them, but I think that if the United States would have joined, there would have been more powers joined on each side. It would have been a domino effect, I think. Like, if the United States would have joined, I think that other countries would join with the United States and possibly against, and then it would have been a big war right there in the Middle East. Like, I think it's going to happen eventually. Nowadays, I think we're nearing a third world war. I mean, it seems to be all in the Zionist plan, who have a lot of control over this planet. Zionists they have their lobby in the United States, and you can't criticize Israel. Have you noticed that? That in this country, you cannot criticize Israeli state, but you can criticize the Germans or many others, but you start criticizing the Israelis, and then they have this big shield of anti-Semitism that they put up against you. But the thing is that these Israelis are mostly European Ashkenazi Jews, not Semitic, and actually the Palestinians are Semitic Hebrews. But the thing is, they converted to Islam after the biblical Israel ended. Many converted to Islam when Prophet Muhammad gained strength in the 600s and later. And as Islam spread, since it was near the birthplace of Islam, which was Mecca, which was to the south, I believe, of current-day Palestine, and so they're the true Semitic people, are the Palestinians. So the anti-Semitic thing is it's bullshit. It's not true that being against the Israelis, or I'm not against the Israeli people, really, but the Israeli government is anti-Semitism, because and even it's not even being anti-Jewish, because there's Jews that stand against Israel, but then the Israeli government would say that they're self-hating Jews, but that's bullshit again, because the Jews prospered when they used to them and the Arabs used to live and coexisted happily when they lived under one Palestinian state back before the British Mandate, back before the Israeli state was created. The state of Israel was created, in 1946 by the British Mandate. British stole land out of Palestine, and then they gave it to Jews that were coming from Europe, migrating from Europe to Palestine, and then they made this new state. And then when Israel moved in, they eventually got recognized in 1947. There was two states there, Palestine and Israel. And I wouldn't say that it was the two that didn't really work out, because after that, Israel did not recognize Palestine to be a state at all, really. And they forced the Palestinians that were in their lands, these British mandated lands, out by massacres. I mean, I think 750,000 people had to flee their homes in Palestine. Right in the 1948 evacuation, when they evacuated, or more like kicked out, all these Palestinians from the make-way of the European Jews that were coming there, and then that made the new state of Israel. And then in '67 is when they went to war with each other, and then after that, Palestine became practically specks. It separated, I think, after that, and turned into West Bank and Gaza. And now West Bank is just there's only Gaza that only saw a piece of Palestine. And then there's the other parts that are just specks nowadays because of Jewish settlements now. They're taking every last piece of land the Palestinians had, and it's being replaced by Israel. It's imperialism, and it's taking land that's not yours and claiming it to be yours, and then when they fight back, you call them terrorists. The Native Americans know very well what happened what happened with the Europeans coming on their land and taking it, and then later pretty much called them savages and stuff like that when they tried to fight back to any extent for their land, and when they didn't, just roll over against the Europeans, the imperialists that were come from Europe, and or that were descendants of Europeans. And these Israelis are doing what the Americans or the Europeans did to the Native Americans here. These Israelis are doing genocide against these Palestinians who rightfully own the land. And I don't care what you say, oh, but Jesus gave it in the Bible. Jesus in the Bible said that Israel is for the Jews. Well, it's not the same people even. If you're going to use that argument is kind of weak for one. I mean, using a religious book to base an argument off of when it comes to international law, and then after that, your little argument there is, I can easily expose it, because when it came to that, these people are not the same Israelites. Israelites and Israelis are very different things. Israel are very different people. But biblical Israel, that's what I'm going to make the point. Biblical Israel and Israel are very different. Modern Israel, biblical and modern Israel are very different, because biblical Israel was populated by Semitic Jews, and modern Israel is populated by European Jews. They converted later at some point, and were not from the Middle East. So these Ashkenazis, Khazarians that are in Israel today are not anywhat connected to these Israelites back in the Bible. So that argument is false. You can't use that argument. And if we were to think about, some people are probably like, well, the Bible's the ultimate authority or whatever. Yeah, but look, there's 5,000 different religions on this planet. We can't base off of, we can't base our international law off of religious books, really. If we really, it would turn into just too much of a mess, honestly. The Palestinians had the land, and they should keep the land. And it was nice there back then. Look, the Palestinians and the Israelis lived, happily together at the time. The Palestinians in the world, they weren't Israelis, but the Palestinians in the Palestinian Arabs and the Palestinian Jews, they were both one country, and that's how it should be. Palestine should be one country. No, it should be secular. It shouldn't be the Islamic State of Palestine. And it shouldn't be the Jewish state of Israel. It should be one secular state that's accepting of all religions, the Christians who are in Palestine being persecuted, the Jews and the Arabs, Muslims, all three religions, or the people that don't even have religion, should be accepted there. This is the Holy Land of three different major religions, all three Abrahamic religions. This is their Holy Land. And Israel doesn't have much respect for that the Muslims consider that their Holy Land. The Muslims have, Al-Aqsa Mosque, but, because the Jewish want to build the last temple on that, they have decided to vote on it in their parliament, in the Israeli parliament, whether they should tear down a major part of their Holy Land, a very integral part, a very major part of their Holy Land, and completely disregard that so they can have their own thing there, the last temple on top of it, which it's wrong. Okay, whatever. Besides, if you're Jewish, Christian, Muslim, you just have to realize that principle is wrong. That's what's wrong about it. You got to look at the principle when it comes to this very complicated dealing of Israel and Palestine. And Palestine is really the sole legitimate country there, because Israel just is the occupying country. Palestine was there for hundreds of years in the past. Remember, Jesus was born in Bethlehem, Palestine. It's a historical country that was there. Israel wasn't historically there. Israel's a brand new creation. your grandparents remember when they established Israel. It was 1946 when the British Mandate happened. That was only 68 years ago. That's barely any time in the whole scheme of things compared to the Palestinians who had that for hundreds of years, and this is only 7 decades. Don't buy into the Israeli propaganda that the Israeli empire is shrinking. They often make it seem like Israel's always been there, because they try to put biblical Israel and they show this big empire, and it's slowly shrinking until modern-day Israel. But the truth is that biblical Israel ceased to exist, and then Palestine took over what is now Israel, and then one day modern-day Israel, stole the Palestinians' land, and that's more like the truth, not that the Israeli empire is shrinking. And the Zionists, they often get to the hearts of Americans, via the churches here in this country. They've often preached pro-Zionist propaganda in their churches. Usually stuff like saying that to be a good Christian, you have to support the state of Israel. Well, that's not true, because Israel is persecuting Christians. Let it be known, I'm going to make it known that that Israel is Israel persecuting Palestine, which is Christians and Muslims. It's not just Muslims, and there's even some Jews in Palestine. I think that it's ended up on the wrong side of the wall. Remember also, Palestine is like an inescapable prison almost. It's not a terrible country to live in. There's some pride, I think, for people that are Palestinian out there. And one of the people that got me into this into the radio business, or at least one of the key people that led me to this radio, and led me to the truther community more on Facebook. That's what this person did, was a Palestinian. That was back about a little over a year ago. I don't think I would have started radio if I wouldn't have had him and another person guided me slowly to becoming on the radio career. I met the truther community on Facebook, and then I met radio people on Facebook, and I eventually got a job doing radio. And I turned up, well, not a job, but I got to do radio. I've never been paid to do radio, by the way. And then for the last about, I think it's 8 months or something like that, I've been doing radio, and I've been pretty good at it. Even though last week,
when you start getting paid, that's when we're going to have to worry about you, Chris. You're good. You're very good. Sorry I took so long there.
That's good, man. But it's great having you on the show again. We haven't had you in about 3 months. But
very insightful review, man. Yeah, it's unfortunate what's happening. I heard you mention hijack a couple of times. There's a lot of hijacking going on as far as religion and land and ideology, and that's what these people do.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, I talked about it's a lot of propaganda also. That's what I've been exposing, is the propaganda Israel puts out. I've seen one of the propaganda pieces they put out is that instead of they show Palestine shrinking, they show biblical Israel, and then they show modern-day Israel, and they show the steps in between, apparently, to Israel shrinking, and make it seem like Israel shrinking.
Yeah, that's just what they did with was it Diane Sawyer? There was a couple of them, but showing rocket fire and basically destruction, and saying showing Palestinians mourning and saying they were Jews, and the destruction was done by Palestine by Hamas rockets, when it was the exact opposite. And then they issue an apology the next day, I guess, on their Twitter, and but once the damage is done and people think that these are actually, Israelis suffering, when it's in fact the opposite. The damage is done already. It's shameless what they're doing.
Oh yeah, it's definitely shameless. The Israeli people, a lot of them have been put into this mindset. These people that live in Israel, I don't know how they got to this point, but they've almost stopped looking at Palestinians as humans. You know, and I think a lot of the world does not look at Palestinians as humans.
Mm-hmm.
And when they see these numbers of 1,000 people dying, these are people, all the families. I mean, a lot of these are kids, parents losing. All of a sudden, their kid gets killed in a bombing by Israel. You know, like they bombed at school the other day, and then another time they sent a mortar.
Hospital. That's what they do. They dehumanize. If you look at all the great quote unquote leaders, Israeli leaders, they call Palestinians animals. And to do this kind of destruction, you really have to dehumanize the people and make it as if who you're killing are less than human.
Oh yeah, that's
repeatedly
definitely
call Palestinians animals, and Arabs in general, just animals. So it makes it easier, I guess.
The Israelis, one of the most disturbing pictures I've seen throughout this conflict. This was right about the beginning of the conflict. There was this picture I got out on the internet showing these Israeli people sitting in lawn chairs like they were watching fireworks on 4th of July, upset it's bombs going down on Gaza. Like this is a spectacle, fireworks. But these are people getting killed, families getting broken up, absolute tragedy. And these Israelis, again, they dehumanize because, they dehumanize. People start to look almost at just the numbers now, or just like animals. And people do not realize what these top rabbis that are connected with the Zionists, head of Zionism. They have these departments connected to the ideology of Zionism. In Israel, though, they have the one department is like literally the Department of Zionism, and one of their top rabbis literally called the Palestinians animals, called them subhuman. They make these.
Palestinians. One that comes to mind is Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, for whom, let's not forget, the largest funeral in Israel's history was held for this guy. I mean, just tens and thousands of people, if I'm not mistaken. It was the largest funeral, and this guy, this is the one who basically said we will give them missiles with relish. Animals they are. I'm sorry. It's really just sad that many Israeli leaders have made it a point to purposefully refer to Arabs and Palestinians as animals.
Yes.
And that aids them, in the destruction. And I guess it kind of justifies it in some people's minds. And this is the general view of many people. Just Joe Sixpack, Joe and Jane Sixpack out there on the street. This is what they believe.
Oh, yes. Most Americans have been brainwashed become pro-Israeli, and it's disturbing. When I see, it's nothing more creepier to me, I don't think. When I see on somebody's bumper sticker, I stand with Israel, we must not abandon Jerusalem, that kind of stuff. It just gets into my mind. Like, these people are so brainwashed. They probably don't know anything about the Palestinian genocide, or very little. They probably buy all the Israeli propaganda, and
they're just parroting.
Kind of obvious, though, how they do this propaganda. And because in the United States, they have the biggest lobby in the United States. American Israeli Public Affairs Committee is the biggest lobby in the United States, so they have, with that lobby, makes it where you cannot criticize Israel. You can criticize any other country, it seems like, in this country, to an extent. But when you criticize Israel to any extent, people start to freak out here.
Absolutely.
You have conversations. You just try to start a conversation. They immediately disregard any talk against Israel as being anti-Semitic. I already brought up this point. The people in Palestine are the ones that are actually Semitic. Semitic are from there. These people they're in Israel. The Israelis are European. They're Ashkenazi.
You can't even proffer an audit the Fed bill without being called anti-Semitic. They got the whole gamut covered on the anti-Semite stuff. It's quite pathetic.
What's funny too is that Netanyahu, who is now current prime minister of Israel, has even said that what that whole anti-Semite thing's about. Why they just use it to detract any criticism of Israel. He said anybody who's against the state of Israel is anti-Semitic, which anybody with any bit of a brain should have looked at that and should have looked at that and really wondered. I mean, that's absolutely nuts, because nowhere else, if you say you're against the state of Germany, they won't say you're anti-German. If you're against the German government or whatever, or any other government in the planet, our government, you're not against the people there. But the fact that they have the state of Israel, who also had many Jewish people against, and they're saying that anybody who stands against them is anti-Semitic, shows that they have put this shield of anti-Semitism to work.
Yeah, well, it's funny.
And nobody's going to be able to criticize them.
A former minister in Israel said it's a trick, anti-Semite. We use it all the time. Shalamit Aloni, she was on Democracy Now. She said it's a trick. We use it all the time. When we don't like what somebody says, we call them anti-Semite.
Yeah,
pretty open.
Israelis have these top Israeli leaders have made it known what kind of people they really are. They say what kind of people they really are. But to Americans,
Chris,
they put a lot of stuff.
Look at their Mossad slogan, Chris. The Mossad slogan is,
make
we
war,
shall do war through deception.
Through deception. Yes, it's right there. And that's exactly what they do. They will make a false flag and make a lot of deception to make some boogeyman out there. Like 9/11. It started the whole Islamic terrorist boogeyman in the United States. That is now Americans will do anything, practically any wars for Israel, because as long as it's against terrorism. Anybody who has the balls to stand up to Israel, they'll just get the United States Army to go fight them. That's what I think Syria is really about, because Syria has been, the Syrian government has been historically against Israel. You see FSA soldiers, Free Syrian Army soldiers, that are Netanyahu goes visit them. That should say who the Free Syrian Army are really fighting for.
Mm-hmm.
Fighting for Netanyahu and Israel. They're not fighting for freedom or whatever. They're just fighting to become part of another Israeli-influenced Middle Eastern country, which there's a few of them. The Gulf states that have been completely silent during this Israeli-Gaza conflict. Like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates. They don't even say anything when these atrocities are committed, because they're practically under, their leaders under Israeli payroll practically. They get money from Israel.
I was just going to say that, they got to create just like Hamas. Hamas is a Mossad creation. It's very demonstrable. You can, they need to create these threats, because they really nary exist. And when they do exist organically, I'm sure they get happy that they don't have to go out and create them. But they've been militarizing Muslims since the 20s. They know how to do it, and I think it's Mark Glenn who points out very keenly that there was really all these anti-American Arabs. He does the math, and they could easily wreak havoc in America if the numbers were as they say. Just take, do the math for every Muslim man between 16 and 35 or whatever. I mean, they could just do so many things if they were really wanted death to America. But this stuff is promulgated by the Zio occupiers, as Jonathan Azariah calls them, the Zionist usurpers. They've usurped everything important, all the key things. They pretty much have it. Your media, your money, all the tools of degradation. They got it.
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, that whole Middle Eastern, these terrorists that are in the Middle East. A lot of them are created by Israel. These are Israeli creations. ISIS, I believe, is an Israeli creation. That all of a sudden this boogeyman that came up in Iraq and Syria, and again, talking about people against Bashar al-Assad, they're also against Bashar al-Assad, these many agents of Israel and the United States that are on the Syrian opposition, including the FSA. But, I think one of the original CIA operations in the Middle East / Mossad operations is the Muslim Brotherhood. I think that's a major one that they've been using. The Muslim Brotherhood, again, they do back the Syrian opposition. They were just in charge of Egypt, but I think the Egyptian people are a little bit more, keen to, when they've been duped, and they were duped by Mohammed Morsi, but, then al-Sisi, it seems like Egypt never gets a break. Every time they have a revolution, it just seems like another puppet gets put in there. They went from Mubarak, U.S. puppet, and then they went to Morsi, Muslim Brotherhood. Now they went to al-Sisi, who seems to be an Israeli, be working with Israel. He won't even let these injured Palestinians that are trying to get out of Palestine and try to go to Egypt for medical care. He won't even let them see medical care. He's closed off the border completely, al-Sisi. But they do many different operations getting these, mostly these Islamic extremist movements. Israel has their paws behind them. The dirty paws are all over these Islamic extremist movements, and to take out any regime that stands against them. I wouldn't be shocked if they do something also against Iran. I think they've just been spreading all that nuclear propaganda against Iran, and this is true. That haven't they been saying for what, the last 20 or 30 years that they've been saying for that in the next 6 months Iran will have nuclear weapons?
Mm-hmm.
They've been saying that just to justify war, and nowadays Americans don't even realize
can't have a nuclear Iran. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we can't have a nuclear
20
Iran.
plus years.
But tell me, how did Israel get their nuclear weapons? Was it by any bit international law? No. Israel
if you work and pay taxes in America, that's how they, that's a large part how they got their nuclear weapons, if you're a United States taxpayer.
Exactly. 1960s, they were becoming nuclear, and but who was one of the people I think that was trying to stop that was John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the president of the United States at the time. He was going to send monitors over to one of their main nuclear facilities to make sure that Israel did not become a nuclear Israel, and that and the Fed, making that executive order to in June 4th, 1963. To give the United States Treasury the power to print debt-free money, not the Fed's fiat currency. Those two things right there, I think got them killed. You have the Fed and the Israeli government against them.
Well, yeah, JFK wrote a letter to then Prime Minister Ben Gurion saying that he needs to inspect Dimona. He wants to, that we can't have you stockpiling nuclear weapons, and they didn't like that. And the Executive Order 11001, whatever it is, they didn't like that either, because that essentially killed the Fed.
Yes. And that's another big piece of propaganda Israel uses, that they say, oh, we're so defenseless, the entire Middle East is going to go get us. Oh, no, look, the Middle East wants to destroy us completely. Every country wants to come after us. But it's like, okay, Israel, you have enough nuclear weapons to flatten the entire planet if you wanted to. Number two, half of those Middle Eastern countries work for you. Only two actually against you. And they don't, and Iran looks like they might have nuclear weapons, but, Israel's not defenseless. They're not this little defenseless country in the Middle East. For a long time, the rest of the Middle East is defenseless against Israeli aggression, because Israel can do whatever it wants because it has the threat of, getting the United States behind them. Because they can get the United States Army at any point. They think of the United States people as practically their cattle, their pawns that they can use.
Precisely.
That's exactly what they call. They think of the United States as cattle, the people in the United States, because they're not Jewish. And with the nationalistic view of Israel, they believe they're inferior. And I wish American people knew what the Israelis thought of them. That the Israelis think that the Americans are inferior to them, and they're practically, again, just their pawns.
Well, there's a Talmudic quote, the best of the Gentiles, should be killed, like the best, the snakes. And people will argue that that's only, in wartime, but if you look at it, we are in wartime right now, and this is a perpetual war, and this is their mindset. This is the Talmudic mindset. The best of Gentiles should be killed to ameliorate or mitigate the threat to they see non-Jews as a threat, and that's demonstrated over and over in their speech at the top religious political leaders' speech.
Yeah, and the Talmud is what a lot of these Zionists get their ideology from. They take stuff out of the Talmud, and that's how they justify their these just stuff that's absolutely crazy. Talking about missiles with relish and stuff like that. They justify with the Talmud. These people are Talmudic Jews, these are pretty much Talmudic Jew and Zionists kind of go together in Israel. I mean, that's how the Zionists get their ideology from.
And there are some splinter groups that demonstrate, they do demonstrate, but the large part, like you said, the mindset is sitting on lawn chairs, watching real rockets that do real destruction hit Gaza, while the little rockets made from plumbing scraps or whatever barely do any damage. If they hit, I just saw a Hamas rocket. There's a video of it hit a lawn or something. It does nothing. They're not guided.
Yeah, exactly.
The victim stats, this is what these people are very good at doing. Poor us, victim stats. Anything that they can manufacture to the world, to make the world see that there's a perceived threat to them or a perceived damage done. They love the victim status because look where it's gotten them. Poor little defenseless Israel. Yeah.
They love to use that victim status on everything, to justify all their actions. It's just like, we're just doing it to protect ourselves. Oh, poor us. We'll get destroyed if we don't do this. Again, they have this little Gaza, these rockets coming from Gaza. These, these Palestinians are shooting back. They're nothing. They're practically might as well be model rockets that they're shooting back at them.
It's analogous to the little Palestinian kids throwing rocks at tanks. That's the perfect analogy. They really haven't killed anybody.
No, and then the Israelis, they shoot back. I mean, they have everything in their arsenal, and the United States taxpayers paid for it. These all these missiles and smart bombs, stuff that does real damage. Stuff that if it hit your neighborhood's gone.
Absolutely.
They got and they use these, and then in Israel, they have everything from a little teeny missile up to a nuke. They have tons of arsenal. They're not defenseless like they try to make it seem like on the news. And watching the mainstream media garbage today, I saw one of the people. I don't know. He wasn't the prime minister or the president or anything like that, but, wasn't Netanyahu or was it Perez, but it was one of the top people in Israel. He's trying to say, all the Israeli attacks that were on those Palestinians that killed kids and stuff like that was just misfires. We didn't mean to do that. They always try to make it seem like it's a mistake.
That's one of the excuses that they use. The talking points on Gaza is that Israel avoids civilian casualties, but Hamas, aims purposefully to kill civilians, which is just complete bullshit. But anyway,
absolutely. Cool. But it sucks that
The weapons are so crude, Chris. I mean, the weaponry is so crude that Hamas has.
I know.
And I don't know if you saw the story the other day. A top professor in Israel talks about the threat of rape being a good weapon for.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
I mean, this is par for the course with those people.
They think that they should go rape Palestinian women in order to inflict fear and terror. Again, they talk about terrorists, and they're talking about literally terrorist tactics. Literally the definition of terrorism they plan on inflicting on the Palestinian people via rape. They try to make their IDF as as monstrous as possible. They make these IDF to the point where they'll kill kids, rape women. The IDF. If I was forced to, I would take any prison sentence over having to join that IDF in Israel. I would just escape. I wouldn't be in Israel. I'd be like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to go and kill children. I don't know how these people do it. How these people can make these Palestinians into where they're not even humans anymore. It's got to be some serious brainwashing and training in this IDF. It's got to be something just absolutely. It's got to be like I know armies can do this. I mean, it's breaking people down and building them back up into a new person. Our military have that same strategy, or at least used to. That's why they do the boot camp and really just beat you down physically. And then when it's really not about getting you physically in shape, and it sort of is, but it's more about the mental thing. It's about getting you to the point where you will listen to whatever they say. You don't have much independent thought anymore, and now you're just practically just another part of the machine, practically, the military machine.
It's that learned helplessness that takes place. Let us inform you. Don't. But back to this rabbi. I just wanted to know the numbers. This Rabbi Ovadia Yosef. Guess how many people attended his funeral? 850,000 people attended this man's funeral. Largest funeral, clearly, by far, in history of Israel. Now, what this guy says is he made this notorious. Gentiles are like, it's sad when your donkey dies, just like it's sad when a Gentile dies, just like it's sad when your donkey dies, because the donkey's here to serve you. The donkeys are here to serve us as we sit back like an effendi. Arabs are damnable and must be annihilated. The evil ones they are, we must give them missiles with relish. Katrina was done by God to punish. This guy made just chock full of anti-Gentile statements, and this is the mindset in Israel. Twice as large as any funeral in the history of Israel. Almost 1 million people attended. So it doesn't take much to for one to see where the collective.
I could see how they get turned into I could see how they get turned into now the IDF monsters I was talking about. If 850,000 people, how many people even live in Israel? They can't. I don't know the exact population. I don't know the numbers. It's got to be only a few million people. It's only the size of New Jersey, Israel, and 850,000 people attended this guy, this absolute monster. If this guy was saying those comments, if somebody's made those comments against Jews.
Imagine the shoe on the other foot. Boy, that would be justification for white phosphorus rockets. If a top, Arab leader was to say something like this. In fact, they used it. The kidnapping of these 3 girls, which is probably a inside job. That justifies wholesale murder, because three Israeli girls got kidnapped. Now they can just go murdering people willy-nilly, mostly civilians and children.
Those Israelis were, let's put this in perspective. I saw this by somebody I know on Facebook that said, okay, let's put this in perspective to Americans. What if 3 Americans were kidnapped, okay, and they were kidnapped in an American colony in Mexico? Because remember, this was in Hebron, where the Israelis have put a colony there. Okay, so they kidnap them in an American colony in Mexico. These Mexicans, random Mexican assailants, go and kidnap them and then find them dead somewhere else in Mexico a few days later. And then the United States goes and bombs Mexico City relentlessly after that. The whole world would call this a horrible action. It would be one of the worst things that's ever happened in history, according to the world, or most unexcusable acts of military violence. But this is exactly what the Israelis are doing today in Gaza. They had 3 Israelis got kidnapped and they were found dead, and now they've killed 1,000 already. It's only been a month in this conflict. This conflict doesn't look like it's going to end soon. It looks like it's still got some time. It might go for a few more months. They keep talking about ceasefires. It doesn't look like any ceasefires in staying.
Yeah. Who violates the ceasefires? I mean, historically, I mean, there's not even a question.
It's the Israelis.
200 violations, to what, like 70 Palestinian violations, and they're manufactured as well, in my opinion. I mean, at this point, historically, statistically and historically, these things are manufactured as far as I'm concerned. And so the burden of proof is on the establishment, the Zio usurpers, as far as I'm concerned.
What do you think?
The onus is on them.
Here's another part of propaganda. I'm going to ask you this question. They've been saying that the Israelis have accepted 4 ceasefires and that Hamas rejected those 4 ceasefires by, I guess, 2 by the UN, 1 by Egypt, and 1 by somebody else. And Israel saying, we accept these 4 ceasefires, but the Hamas wouldn't accept them. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't know. I think you would have to see somebody like a Norman Finkelstein, because you have to look at the terms of these ceasefires. Like, who? It's like saying, well, I'm going to split this chicken dinner with you, and here you can have a leg, and I'm going to take the rest. I mean, you have to look at the terms that are on the table, which are, in every historical example that I can recall, laid out by, top academics. They're just one-sided terms and unfair conditions. I'm not familiar, Chris. I'd be lying if I told you I'm familiar with these 4 ceasefires.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the terms of them either, so I was hoping you know some about them. That's one of the main pieces of Israeli propaganda in the last week. They've been saying that. I've seen that meme. There's Israeli activist pages on Facebook, and every now and then I seem to run into their crap that they've spread on Facebook and see people saying, I stand with Israel. And these are people who are also supposedly truthers. That's the most worst thing I ever see, when these people say, I stand against the New World Order, and I'm a libertarian, and I stand against this oppressive government. But please tell me, what's one of the main roots of the New World Order? Why is your government so corrupt? You could point back to one city, Tel Aviv, but they'll never say that. There's almost like these fake truthers. If they can't point out Israel, you're not pointing out a big part of this equation about the New World Order, because they're one of the big roots. I mean, sure, there's other roots, but Israel is one of the biggest roots, maybe biggest root in all of it.
At least in this era, in this cycle, it's undeniable, and I'd be very, very circumspect and suspicious of anybody not only not talking about Israel but defending them.
Yes,
they're indefensible.
I'm just assuming that they don't know too much. There's some people that just don't know about the Palestinians. I try to inform them about what's going on with the Palestinians. And what's a good thing is that whenever I see this propaganda spread on Facebook, there's always people on my, that are siding with the Palestinians and always calling, Israel on that bullshit. There's a lot of people I think that are awake online. I've seen them. It's good.
Absolutely.
It's good to see that people know about what's going on in Palestine.
World opinion is, not only has it shifted, but it's been there for a long time, but it's even the more and more of these people do these heinous acts, these atrocities, the more it's going to shift. And I honestly don't know what it's going to come down to. I guess there's a distraction element, when they're going to take the pensions, why they're, stockpiling hollow tips that are even banned from war, and they're militarizing the police, all this surplus, and I use that word very lightly, the surplus weaponry that the Pentagon deems surplus. They're basically arming your local police departments because they're going to fuck with you really bad. What are they going to do bad enough that they're getting ready for a war with hollow tips?
They've been militarizing the police now for some time. It's a police state. There's no other thing to call it. That's the best way to call it, the police state. It's about the point to becoming a military state, military dictatorship. The police have become militaristic, and I have the bad feeling that one day, that soon, there's going to be martial law in this country, and it's going to be by some false flag, probably.
That's probably what's going to spark it. I just saw this meme, though. It was quite enlightening. How did we go from this, and it shows like an old black and white police car, to this, and it shows a tank, basically. How did we cross that line? We're there.
They slowly scared the Americans, into the thinking that there's always these, again, like the Middle Eastern boogeyman. They make it seem like, it's a boogeyman tactic. That's what they've been doing. And, I've seen that. I think they showed, I see they show Andy Griffith, the Andy Griffith show, and then go into nowadays police. And the thing is that, when that's actually kind of how the police were back in the day. I mean, they used to be more like public servants. I mean, they were friendly, normal people used to be that you could go up and they would help you with stuff or whatever. They didn't used to, strangle people because they were selling illegal cigarettes like they did to that guy in New York the other day. Do you see that story?
I was actually in New York. Yeah, when I saw that headline, yeah, it's sad.
But this guy also pled for his life. He was pleading for his life. He said he couldn't breathe, and they just completely ignored that and they let him die. And they strangled this guy.
Afterward, Chris, did you see that? 7 minutes. They're like tapping him. It's going to be all right. It's in the EMT they bring in. I think he's got a pulse. I mean, welcome to Obamacare.
Yes, exactly.
That's a little glimpse into, how it's going to be. The EMT can't even get the guy's pulse to determine whether or not he's alive. And he's probably dead, and they're tapping him on the shoulder. It's going to be all right. It's going to be all right.
Yeah.
What a shame for that guy's family is all I have to say.
They couldn't determine, whether they needed to revive him or not, and I guess whatever attempts they did, which probably weren't any or very little, they didn't, they failed, obviously, as the guy died. And, look, this is what's going to, I bet those police, pretty much just stopped any real attempts to bring him back because, that's, what Obamacare is going to be like. I think down the future, what's scary is, if you're an enemy to them, they're not going to try too hard when you get sick or whatever, get injured, and you go to the hospital. When you go to the hospital.
Without a doubt, that's the design.
Yeah, if you're an enemy to them, they're not. Of course, they're like this guy. I bet they weren't really trying that hard. Probably I bet the police probably were. They didn't care. Or probably almost hoped that guy died right there because that's the police mentality, and they thought they were doing right or whatever. And this guy was just selling black market cigarettes. He was selling without tax cigarettes, something that many people do to make an extra buck here and there, and doesn't really harm anybody. I mean, sure, but I wouldn't suggest smoking cigarettes, but it doesn't harm. It's not like it's not even like this guy was selling cracker sauce, and this guy was just making a few bucks here and there. And you know how many people do this? It's a lot of people do this for extra buck, especially in more rougher neighborhoods. And this guy was a very good guy too.
Where's the illegality come in? You know, like what if I was to say, here, I'm going to buy some tobacco, you go roll me a bunch of them, and I'll pay you for the rolling. I mean, it's like a mushroom. I hate to go back to this analogy, but I love it. Like, when does having a mushroom, a psychedelic mushroom, become illegal? Like when you touch it, when you pick it up off the cow shit, when you put it in your mouth. But, you know, it's very ambiguous, number one. And two, that you could tell they were breaking his balls from you know, what I heard. They're just harassing this guy. And I heard the video was kind of threatening. When I see it, you know, he just says, you know, it's you guys harass me, and this is where it stops. There was no, and then they put him in a chokehold, and then he's gone.
Yeah, you know, was this guy? This guy was also a good guy in the community too. You know, from reports around. I mean, they called him the gentle giant. You know, he never did, and he wasn't even a criminal to any extent, and he just did this, you know, just because of simple legality, and then the police come and harass him, and then they choked him out, and that's again, you said a glimpse into Obamacare. This is the police state nowadays. That certainly will happen every time. You know, if the police did something that caused you, or you know, you're an enemy to the police or whatever, and then they injured you, or you're injured, they're not going to help you. You know, especially I'm sure that the police blocked any efforts to revive that man. And that's why the paramedics, you know, made their little bullshit story up. They all made their little bullshit story up to what happened later. You know, they just let him. Honestly, they choked that guy out. They let him die, and nobody. And there's the problem is that there is sort of some people that are mad about it, but it should be an outrage. You know, and this happens a lot. Police doing actions like this that are, you know, they kill people without any justified reason. You know, and this is just one of many. But this one, I wish there was just one.
Administrative work, or they get put on desk duty. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Most of the time when they kill somebody, they get 2 weeks vacation paid while they investigate. So, you know, they don't do any, the police departments don't do any real punishment, just a slap on the wrist. If that, I mean, really, you give them 2 weeks paid vacation. You know, they tell them to go home for 2 weeks while they pay them usually, or unpaid, but usually it's paid while they investigate. Okay.
I would love to have
they never lose their job.
A group that I could hire to investigate myself. That would be lovely. But real quick on the ceasefires, the violations of the ceasefires, I got the numbers here, 191 for Israel, 75 for Palestine, I guess in 2012 and 13. Deaths that led to it were 18 and hundreds of, well, about 100 injuries. And Palestine, you know, the deaths to Israelis were none, and there was 3 injuries or something. But you see, you know, not only who breaks the more ceasefires, but you know where the danger, you know, where the homicides and fatalities are coming from.
Definitely. Look, that's like if you look at all the conflicts around Israeli-Palestine history, they always have been like, you know, they always have like. They always have very little deaths on the Israeli side. Usually, like you know, like I was saying, I think that 08-09 conflict. You know, excuse me if I don't have the exact numbers, but it's something like 13. I think were Israelis killed in that entire conflict. 1,300 Palestinians killed. That's 100 Palestinians per one Israeli soldier killed. Or yeah, most of them were soldiers. That's the thing too. They weren't even civilians are rarely killed in these conflicts between Israel and Palestine. You know, it's usually just a few IDF and a lot of Palestinian citizens, and then a few Hamas here and there. You know, by the Palestinians, it's like they don't even get that many combatants, but they get a ton of civilians. You know, like 80% of them will be civilians, 20% will be combatants, quote unquote, aka just people who shot rockets. Ball rockets back at Israel, and then on the Israeli side, it'll be 99% IDF, 1% civilians ever involved in the conflict on Israel.
I don't know what the numbers are, but yeah, you're talking about Cass Labs killed like 1,400 Palestinians, and the bulk of them were, women, children, and civilians.
And also, what was one of the main things they did know in 08-09 conflict, I already mentioned this on the show but while you were busy, is that in 08-09, the Israelis used white phosphorus on the Palestinian people. They used chemical weapons. And then 4 years later, in 2013, they'd be one of the main criticizers of Bashar al-Assad using chemical weapons. Okay, he didn't really, but here's the thing, he actually didn't use chemical weapons. Saudi Arabia and Israel framed them. They actually did false videos of these people supposedly affected by Bashar al-Assad's chemical weapons, and it was all a black op. It was all revealed by that. That was the Saudis actually were the main ones behind that.
That's a good one, though. They use, huh? He's killed his own people.
Yes, they always. Yeah. And Israel, they have this. They always, they have this. They believe they're so superior that they can just go with fighter jets in other countries like they do to Syria. That they do strikes all the time in Syria. They fly jets in there, do strikes in Syria, and they do it also in Iran. They also are behind many assassinations. A lot of the people behind Iran's nuclear program have been killed by Israel. Israel, they're prominent in the Caribbean too. Former president of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, once quoted, they said the Mossad agents are everywhere in the Caribbean, and they fund the Venezuelan opposition against me and are trying to get me. That's why the Venezuelan opposition never talked about Israel, never talked about the atrocities committed over there, is because they were getting funded by the Israeli and the United States. And, Israel, Mossad are very secretive and unfortunately very good at what they do. That's the problem with Mossad. They're so deceptive. They have some of the best, there might be the best intelligence force on the planet, but, everything they do is to do their motto, make war through deception.
And even it's arguable that they're one of the best, but what they do have, in my opinion, is they got that spin machine. They can spin anything the way that they, want to have it, and the people will believe it. Well, it's decreasing, and the dinosaur media, the legacy media, their numbers are going down. But for those that do depend on that, and it's show business. It's just they're actors, People who depend on that to get their news, they do tend to believe it. The spin cycle is pretty powerful.
That's literally a show on MSNBC. I was watching it one day, and I was like, this show has the name of what they literally do. It's called the Spin Cycle. That's literally the name of the show. It's like on 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's like the worst. It's like the worst show that I think I've seen on the mainstream media. Like all of them suck, but this one's like maybe one of the worst. It's got like 3 feminists on that show, and then they're like everything Obama does is perfect. I watched it like once, and I was like, nope. I know every show that you're going to see on the big 3, especially, is going to be absolutely terrible. If I watch the biggest news I'll watch, I would say, is I'll watch RT, from time to time. I like RT. I mean, they at least give the other side, the Russian side, and they have been very good about covering this Palestinian genocide. I'll give them that. RT, but RT is decent, but the big 3 just gave complete propaganda. They're literally bringing these Israeli top leaders for them to put their propaganda about what's going on in Palestine, and of course they're going to say the same couple things. Oh, we brought these, we accepted 4 ceasefires. They wouldn't accept them. They keep shooting rockets at us. And this is one of the most ugly acts they've done throughout this conflict. When it shows their ugly nature, is that Israel, about a couple weeks ago, was saying, "Oh, it's so dangerous here. There's rockets everywhere. This place is not safe." And then a few airlines were like, "Okay, then we're not going to go there. We shouldn't go to Ben Gurion International Airport if we're in danger of getting hit by a rocket." And they're like, "Oh, no. It's very safe now. We got it all under control." You know. It was like literally a day after, too. So it was like, really? Everybody just hopefully saw how ugly that is of you to do that. You know, they got mad at the United States for the FAA saying for 24 hours they couldn't fly their planes in to Ben Gurion International. No, they were just mad about that one day FAA ban.
Mm-hmm. You see the duplicitous nature in that example. Very, very, very good. You know, once they start fucking with the money. Well, it's very safe actually. The rockets can't reach us. There are no rockets. Yeah, there are rockets, and they're very dangerous. They're killing us, but there are no rockets. Yeah,
it's like literally this happened. It's like it's so dangerous. Okay, everybody freak out. We need the whole international community to help us. We're under a siege. Israel's under siege, and then one day later, and then they get probably Netanyahu got a phone call. It's like, hey, this is from a few airlines. We will not land at Ben Gurion International Airport. Call the media. What's the story? It's completely safe. We somehow ended all the rockets overnight. I don't know. We did something magical. Okay, just say something out there.
They know how to have that.
Netanyahu's like he is the devil when I see that. He is sociopathic. I can see the sociopathic attitude of him through the TV. You know, like when I'm watching him, whenever I see him talk, there's a couple things that point to sociopathic stuff. You know, like remember, like when in front of the UN, he put that picture of the bomb or whatever, with the Iran, and then he's just like, oh, you see here now we have to bomb them at this point. You know, he just talks about bombing, innocent people as just another thing they do. You know, he really doesn't make war seem like war when he's just trying to make a spin on it. You know, again, he dehumanizes the Palestinians through his media. But also Netanyahu, like even when I saw that picture of him meeting that Free Syrian Army soldier and shaking hands with him, just his face was like he couldn't even show empathy. It was not there on his face. It was almost like a giggle. It's like little pawn, pretty much.
Yeah,
like that.
The narcissism it betrays them, especially Bibi Netanyahu. He can't hide it. Can't hide it, Chris.
No, you can't because he's so full of himself. It's ridiculous. I've seen. I like on the other hand, like I saw Bashar al-Assad with the Syrian, with one of his Syrian Arab army soldiers that was injured. That I could see empathy. That wasn't actually a leader that was showing empathy. But Netanyahu, who was supporting the Free Syrian Army, it was no. You can just see empathy. There was a couple signs on that. Like I could see the body language, the weak handshake, almost like the weird grin on Netanyahu's face. It all pointed to that guy thought it was kind of a joke that this guy was injured.
With al-Assad, when I saw the interview with al-Assad, man, he's just not dripping evil. He's not seething. He doesn't have that telegraph. Doesn't that body language. Whereas Netanyahu, the boy can't hide it, so he probably chooses to embrace it. Sick bastard. You can see it in his eyes.
And it's kind of Another time I was watching the news, I remember one of the times Barack Obama visited. I think it was Israel, but I think Netanyahu was there. And it's like the biggest kiss up I've ever seen of a president to a foreign leader. I mean, Obama was just saying, "Oh, this guy's an honorable man, so generous, so nice, so just going on and on and on." And it's like, I was just thinking, "Yep, that's it right there. That's about proof that Netanyahu practically owns the United States." And that Obama
they had him kneeling at 3 memorial sites, like just kneeling to, and I think two of the deceased were just monstrous people. I forget exactly who they were, but he's kneeling and shoveling dirt in his own White House.
Yes. There's all the many things. I mean, Saudi Arabia and Israel, they're very interconnected. Also, like I've also seen Obama bow to the Saudi kings. Those two have a lot of power over the United States, but Israel has the most via that AIPAC. People don't even realize what AIPAC really is, but you should, if you want to know how much power they have, just look at every leader or prospective leader when they visit AIPAC and they do a speech in front of them, how their complete rhetoric goes in favor of them. They always say, "I'll take no option off the table." Barack Obama, when he was talking about Iran, that's I know that one. I remember that part of the speech very clearly because that was very important. That was before that was still when there was hype about him. They was something different. That's it. And people thought he was going to be change America and stuff like that. But he's still bowing to Israel, just like every other president's done since Carter. But Carter still did pro-Israeli actions. He just said stuff later about Israel's apartheid when he was an old man. Well,
he really had no choice. It's like Nixon.
Couldn't undo the actions he did.
You remember hearing Nixon and Billy Graham talk? I mean, it's a glimpse into the control that these people have. It's like I think the same thing. Say that.
Yeah. No, with Nixon, I know that quote. Oh wait. Oh well, it looks Payday cut off. Well, I guess he's gonna have to. He'll have to call in. I'll have to call back in a sec here. Well, it's been a pretty good show so far. We've been an hour and a half in about. Let's see. He's got to call back a couple. Oh yeah, he's called. He already just like that. It got real staticky there, but I already knew it was about the Nixon quote. Controlling the media. The Israelis.
It just shows the control. I know that, but I can't say it.
Yeah, the Israelis control the media. It's or they have a ton of influence over the media. What's one of the most pro-Israeli films that is obviously pro-Israeli, but I don't think people got how much of propaganda this is. That movie "Don't Mess with the Zohan" with Adam Sandler.
I do. Haven't seen it, but yeah.
It made these he's supposed to be this ex-Israeli commando. They make him look like the biggest badass to ever live, or so. He could
I actually wanted to watch it just for that purpose, Chris. But yeah, go ahead.
They make it. They also have the common themes of Israeli propaganda. There's this terrorist guy that's Arabic that he's always trying to fight in the movie. They try to make it. He's working with the Israeli. What is supposed to be one of the branches. I think he might be the Mossad he's working with. He's a commando. Yeah, it's just him fighting this guy. And he's just this badass. I mean, this guy can dodge bullets practically. He could do push-ups with one hand. They just show that, or with one finger and stuff like that. He's just supposed to be like the most badass person ever to live. Which I'm like, this just shows me what kind of person probably Adam Sandler is. I bet this is like his dream, isn't it? You know, he probably wishes he could be some Mossad commando, and in real life he's this out of shape, fat man practically. You know, until I guess he got a little bit in shape for that movie, but the rest of the time he's pretty out of shape. I mean, he's definitely not in shape to be in a commando for any army. I don't even see the hype around. I mean, he's an okay actor, okay at the most, but he's not funny even. I can name funnier actors than him that are way underrated.
Yeah, it seems he plays the same little baby part everywhere. In many places I've seen him. You know, like the little silly, goofy. Look at me, I'm just a little baby.
Like the one movie. Yeah, I don't even like. How can people take that Israeli commando thing all seriously? Like when he was playing as Israeli commando, when just a couple of years before, that's when he played as a retard in The Waterboy. You know, remember that movie?
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of his go-to characters. I mean, from what I've seen, and I'm not, that big of a movie buff, but it's tough to watch, man. It's tough. I've missed many good movies just for that fact. I just can't stand to be. I feel like I'm being time raped sometimes by these movies.
Yeah. Hey, but kind of want to go from Israel to I just want to know, like, it's been a couple months. Are you working on anything new since we last interviewed you?
Every day, my friend. Just about. Yeah.
Have you released any new songs, or you're working on any new songs since?
I'm in the midst of. I'm going to release 2 things, and it's still titles and whatnot are very tentative. I don't. But it's. Yeah. I'm starting on the second half of the creative process, and that's just tying everything together. It's going to be somewhat different from anything anyone has ever heard from me. I can say that.
So, a little alarming thing I saw, this summer. There's been all these rumors on YouTube that they're going to delete all these independent artist materials.
I saw that.
Signed with. Yeah, I think I tagged you in it when I saw that, because I was like, "Oh my God!"
Elaborate on that a little bit. I elaborate on that, because I saw that. I was just a flash, and I never got back to it. But independent artists will be deleted from YouTube.
If they're not, there's going to be some set of record, like record companies or whatever. If it's not one of those ones that they have, I think is the deal. Then they're going to delete it off of YouTube. So not every, if you and that means independent artists mostly. People will see small or don't have a record company that they're signed with. Then they won't have it. They won't have their music up there. But all these mainstream music's going to stay up there because they have I think most of them are signed up via Vivo, or whatever, however you pronounce that, Vivo, whatever. I see most big bands have that, big time artists. But if you're a small time, I think they're supposedly going to delete it. But they said within any day they could have done that, and that was a couple weeks ago. I don't know what's exactly going on, how many people they've deleted so far, if they have started deleting anybody, but I wouldn't be surprised, because the people who own YouTube, they're just some shitheads, honestly, with all their stupid copyright policy. I know I'm not too much informed in YouTube policy, but I heard they have that, they have the YouTube copyright policy that gives people on, and they also have just all the content policies and stuff like that YouTube has. Ever since they got bought by Google, or have they always been part of Google? I thought they've always been part of Google. I thought they.
You know what? It was years ago. Yeah, I think Google purchased them. I don't know why. I just want to say 2008, but I'm not sure. But hopefully there's a shift into alternatives like TrueVid. I'd like to see that blow up. You can say anything you want on there. Daily Motion. and the other one, I forget, starts with a V.
Vimeo?
Yeah, Vimeo. Hopefully there's a shift. But, what's going to happen in that event? They'll buy them, so.
Yeah. The Internet's getting, they get consolidated by these bigger Internet companies. The Facebook is one of the big Internet companies. They buy all kinds of littler stuff all the time, and then they sometimes lose. They lose those deals. Like one time they were connected with Instagram, and they lost it, and Snapchat, and I think other stuff like that they're connected to. But Facebook, YouTube, those two ones, the people who have it, their plans are mostly to censor it. Censor it and control what's on there. It's bullshit. This is supposed to be, it's supposed to be this place where people could, voice what they want, do what they want, but not if you don't follow these guidelines or whatever. And people get banned off of Facebook all the time for bullshit reasons. They say that they put out hate speech or whatever. It was just truth. I think Arab pages, like Arabic pages that are, against Israel, I'm pretty sure they get threatened quite a bit by, because they say that their anti-Israeli content was hate speech when they're just talking about, the Israeli genocide. Usually this is what they say. They'll say, they'll usually refer to the IDF as dogs and stuff like that, and then people get offended, and then they call it hate speech. I think that's how it happens, but.
Happened to me. They wouldn't even tell me what the hell it was, offensive speech or something. But yeah, I put something really offensive on there, hoping that I would get banned, but it didn't happen. They wouldn't even tell me what the hell the offensive picture was.
Yeah,
maybe they
did.
Maybe I missed it. Yeah.
There just shows the power that. The Israeli lobby has, because I think that's what a lot of it's about. Again, and they'll just say stuff like the IDF, calling the IDF dogs or whatever. But honestly, if you're in Israel and you're stuck there and you get drafted, I think if you want to show that you have a good moral character, you would leave and not join the IDF. You don't get in prison, but just leave. That's what I would say. Go somewhere else.
Absolutely.
There's people in prison right now. Actually, they're spending a lot of time. They refuse to draft, and I say
they refuse. They refuse to go. To basically bomb helpless people, and that's commendable. Again,
yes.
It's hard to broad brush stroke and make sweeping indictments, and I really don't like to do that. But you can get a general understanding of the mindset, just by say the good rabbi's funeral. Almost 1 million people, this guy was just lauded, and still is. And things like, Jonathan Pollard case, like they love this guy over there, and this guy was a spy. And Obama's probably going to pardon him, before he leaves. A lot of these Israeli populists are, they're brainwashed, they're so nationalistic, and to the point where they will support the bombing of, innocent people. But I think it's just one major thing. It's ideology Zionism that has caused the problems. It was all great when it was just Palestine, one Palestinian state before the late 1940s, before the British mandate, before the UN recognition of Israel. We're Jews. Yeah, and before the mandate, I heard stories where, there used to, before it was forced and when it was organically assimilated, they were friends. They used to babysit each other's children. And then when this forced, they start propagandizing and race baiting and just setting everything up so everybody hates each other. This is how they win, because it's the ordo ab chaos. Through all this chaos, when the dust settles, they come and enjoy the spoils of war. It's a great tactic. I'm surprised that we haven't caught on to it collectively by now. But they got all kinds of new angles to hit you from with it. But They love the chaos.
Yes, because you know what the New World Orders, these elites, one of their main mottos is to make order out of chaos. That's how they make everything go to shit. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Make everything go to shit, and then they seize control amidst all that chaos. Here's something to think about that Americans should think about, is that Americans will not look into Israel's role on 9/11. When 9/11 was an inside job, they should just realize that by the physics of the towers falling, can't have a building fall at the speed of free fall when there's stuff under it, unless it was an implosion, because there was nothing under it, because it was exploded and then just fell, all that rubble. That's the only way it's possible, that it was implosion. But they should look at the dancing Israelis, how these people, this is a tragedy. These people are dancing, these people that were working with Israel. And there was also, a lot of the people that were arrested on 9/11 were not Arab, they were Israeli.
Yeah.
They were
over 100 of them. And, the FBI has, you can see in some of the classified, what is made available, the guy's flicking a lighter in front of the burning building, taking pictures, pictures of him flicking a lighter while the North Towers are burning.
Yeah.
Tremendous.
There's so many, there's quite, actually wasn't the people with these, there was a bomb on the George Washington Bridge, and, I think that's the bridge that crosses the West River going from New York to Pennsylvania, to New Jersey.
We're not your problem. It's the Palestinians. One was reported as saying the George Washington Bridge bomb, the mural on the urban moving systems. There was a mural of a plane flying into the tower. Yes,
there was also there were many vans of these Mossad vans seen around in New York City on that day, and there was one of the main ones was that van was full of bombs going across the George Washington Bridge, and the people in that van were Israeli. The mural van, that should just be like another smoking gun. I mean, World Trade Center 7 is a smoking gun. How this building falls from supposedly structural damage 12 hours later, and BBC even reported that it had fallen while they're pointing at it. It's literally there. They're pointing at it 30 minutes before it happened. That's the biggest blunder made of that whole 9/11 operation. I mean, literally on BBC, pointing at a tower that was still there, hadn't collapsed, and they were saying that it had collapsed. So, at 4:30.
That's pretty amazing, huh?
And it was
the Israeli
5:20.
Involvement is undeniable.
It's undeniable, definitely. They were there. They were definitely overseeing it. I mean, they probably were. I don't know what happened with the George Washington Bridge. It's questionable what exactly went wrong there or stuff like that. Were they actually going to do it before and then they canceled it? The Twin Towers. I mean, that's obvious. Everything of that operation is just it's impossible. Like the Pentagon. There's not even an airplane-shaped hole in there. It's like a perfect circle going into the Pentagon, and then the plane's completely non-existent. Even one of the people that survived the whatever went in there, a missile, a bomb. The footage I saw, it looked like maybe a bomb went off in there. Could have been a missile, I don't know, but it looked like a bomb went off there. But one of the few survivors, she crawled out the hole where supposedly the plane hit. She didn't find any signs of the plane that hit. She literally crawled out that hole. I mean, it's
back to the Pentagon thing. According to the Bureau of Transportation Statistics or whatever, Flight 11 and 77, there was no record of them. They didn't even exist. So, the pilots for 9/11 Truth did a really good piece about that a while ago. They really weren't scheduled to fly.
Yeah, those flights did not exist. At the Pentagon, this is one of the most secure buildings on the planet. They have cameras all around that, and they have footage. They haven't released footage of the plane actually hitting the Pentagon. They showed this one camera feed of it, and it's just an explosion. There's no plane. They say that if a plane would have hit, they would have caught it on camera, even if it's with that 3-second loop or whatever.
You remember that came out, Chris? And I think it was probably Bill O'Reilly. I don't know, one of the talking heads, and a few of them actually, but the one that sticks out, I think it was O'Reilly. He's just like, oh, that's clearly a plane. I think the debate is over now. It's clearly a plane.
Yeah, it's like he's just like trying to make it. He's like the debate. He's just trying to end before it even started. It was like, nope. There's no debate for this. This is the exact truth. You cannot try to debate with me. Nope. It's plain. Don't you see it? It's like, I'd be like, what plane are you seeing? There's just an explosion. Anything could cause an explosion. There's many things that could cause an explosion. Missile, bomb.
They know that power of suggestion will work on a substantial percentage of the population, just because one of their trusted teleprompter readers suggested. Bill O'Reilly saw it. It must be true.
They're like, oh man, I'm not seeing it right. I don't know, maybe my vision's not too good or whatever, but that guy's seeing it, so it's got to be the official story. That's got to be what exactly happened, And people believe that official story that, without even looking into any of all. I mean, there's so many things that went wrong. I mean, I was 11 when I found out about 9/11 not being how it happened. How they say it happened. I mean, it literally like I went on 911truth.org, and then I'm like, okay, let's look at these coincidences. Okay, maybe it's just coincidence. I got to like the part where they're saying about the phones not being able to work up there at the altitude. I'm just like, shit. Well, looks like my government did 9/11. That's nice to know. It was just too many. I mean, there was 40 right there, and they all made perfect sense. They all. It's like those 40 things you would overlook. It'd be like, it's like the official story makes sense if you don't think about it. It's one of those things. It's like, it makes sense if you. That's a lot of mainstream stories work that way. If you don't think about it, which Americans don't think about, they got a lot of other stuff on their mind that they put in there. Kardashians, the NBA right now.
That's it.
Right now, NFL is about to come on.
Red circus.
Which I know what I wish is that they were just Americans were more balanced. They could. I wish they could balance out what their mind's broken up into. Like, sure, I'll watch sport. I'll watch a baseball game here and there, just when I want to put my mind off of stuff. But I'll be on Facebook right after looking at researching spreading the truth. Right now I'm on the radio. Nothing's wrong with watching sports, but people let that be the only thing their brain is filled with. They can tell you the batting average of every person on half of the MLB
Remarkable.
teams. I mean, if only could put this. They have obviously a pretty good space to put information. If only they could fill that space of information with good information, like about 9/11 and stuff like that. There's too much stuff that Americans are so distracted with. So they put all this stuff. Then they also distract them with they put sports, all these stupid, not reality TV shows that are on TV. They always have seem like they have a new one every week. The mainstream media, the mainstream news to distract them and tell them misinformation and lies, and then social media has been mostly not there's been activists that have been like us that have been able to spread truth on the social media, but to most people it's just a distraction. They just go on there and they just look at pictures of cats all day, or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, actually, they'll probably be looking at different kind of pussy online.
Something that just dawned on me that I don't know why I'm picturing the planes, and I haven't thought about it for a few years, that the occupancy rate of these planes, one plane essentially could have had all these passengers on the 4 flights. And Flight 77 is really bizarre because, I've heard the analogy like the passenger list. There's more top secret clearance on that plane than you would find in most mid-sized cities. The chances of that happening. But you could have basically fit. There was supposedly 53 passengers on Flight 77 with 239 capacity. I've flown a few times. I wish I could have been on a plane, with 240 people, and there's only 53. But that doesn't happen. It's just weird shit happening. You basically could have fit all the passengers on one plane, one commercial, airliner.
Yeah, 53. 53 people on a plane that fits 240 people. And also, just think about this this logic. Look at this guy. These Middle Eastern hijackers supposedly hijacked the plane with box cutters. Really? Okay, there would be somebody on that plane that would not be threatened by a little box cutter. There's always that one guy that at least would have came up and punched him right square in the face if it really happened.
So you agree, Chris? They should have hired a better writer. They should have hired a better writer for that.
Definitely. The stories are so... I think they make these stories crappier and crappier, on these false flags, just to see what Americans will accept as truth. How many people will... how many people will start to realize these are lies as these stories get stupider and stupider. But really, I think somebody would have thrown their suitcase at it and saw saying, there's on a plane, come on, there's all kinds of stuff. You could have beat up a guy with a box cutter, get stabbed up a little bit, but in the heat of the moment, there'd be somebody's adrenaline just took over and kicked that guy's ass, especially, a few people on the plane compared to what, they say 19 hijackers were able to do one of the best, one of the best deceptions and,
the maneuvers, yeah.
On the most secure country on the planet, probably, our most, has the best intelligence maybe, and just has all these, it's the most industrialized country on the planet, and they were able to do this maneuver that nobody has done anything even close to that. It kind of reminds, there was a major army back in World War II. It makes me think of it, like supposedly Adolf Hitler was supposed to he was going to go attack factories. He was going to send German troops into the United States covertly, and they were stopped. This was an organized attack by an army, and they couldn't do it. How could 19 people in a cave do it? Really?
And basically, they got away with it, essentially. And imagine the hubris, the arrogance to pull something like this off in the first place, and then to slip it past the bulk of the people to get away with it. Imagine the hubris now that they must have. It's unimaginable.
And also, here's a major bit of information. Remember this, that there was, I think, like 7 or 8 of the hijackers that supposedly got blown up because they were on the planes. They were found alive in Saudi Arabia. They actually said later, yes, I'm actually alive. These people that supposedly died. Also, remember how they found their passports on the street? Perfect. Really, I just like to see that scene. It's like, oh yeah, there's a big, all this chaos is happening, and the police are, look, we found their passports on their street.
Miraculous.
It came through the fire. It survived the fireball of explosion, fell down to the street. Amidst all the chaos, the police are able, or whatever authorities that recovered it, found their passports sitting there, not even that badly damaged. Really? It's like this.
The magical passports, yeah. I forgot all about that. What a tale.
I saw this one meme. It was like, what? The passports were able to survive that fireball? It was like, I think we should make skyscrapers out of passports from now on out.
Yeah. It makes me want to write a children's story for my daughter to read to her, the magical passports. The magical Saudi passports.
man, it's just one after another coincidence on that. That one just had so many that, 10 coincidences is way too much, and this one has like 100+ coincidences. The stuff that just doesn't match up. And look, it's really the United States. I mean, is the ones that have been mostly duped. But a lot of the rest of the world is not duped by 9/11 anymore. They learned later, maybe way too late. Like Russia, putting in his released satellite photos, and it actually was an inside job. Same thing with the Iranian leader. Remember when Ahmadinejad did that speech at the UN, and then I remember everybody stormed out when he said the 9/11 was an inside job. He was bringing up good details too, and then
he was.
Oh, of course, Obama made his little statement. It was like, "Oh, well, how can you do this to us, Ahmadinejad? You have disgraced the American people," and all this. I was like, "Why you do this? Spreading these lies and propaganda." And it's like, of course, you knew that statement was coming from Obama after that. And that was in 2010. I remember that. The UN.
Yeah.
It's not.
That's all you really have to do, Like Bill Clinton, how dare you? How dare you? You just have to show this false outrage, this faux justified, indignance. And just pretend that you're, that's just preposterous.
Yes. Bill Clinton was just, I don't know how he got away with half the stuff he did, but, Bill Clinton, I mean, he literally asked what the definition of "is" was. Remember, it was like, well, if you have to define what the definition of a "is."
Yeah. Well, that's just beautiful semantics.
He was a lawyer.
That depends on what the definition of "is." You know what that was. Monica Lewinsky. You know who she was definitely tapped by. She was Mossad affiliated. That was just a little Bill. Don't fuck with us. You think this Monica Lewinsky thing? We got. They can't. No one can get in this office. It seems, which really doesn't mean anything anymore. The President of the United States. It's just a joke. But no one can reach this seat without there being just dirt. Just crazy, scandalous, information gathered on them. It's impossible.
Well, they have blackmail on everybody. I mean, and that's how they keep you in line. Because, and then if you don't fall for the blackmail, like if the blackmail doesn't faze you, well, guess what? You'll be assassinated. Like with JFK, I mean, they had blackmail on him. That was the whole Marilyn Monroe thing and stuff like that. That's what it was about. But when that didn't stop him, they killed him. They'll blackmail you. It's a Machiavellian type tactic. They'll do whatever it takes to win. That's their kind of motto. Even if it's all these strategies, blackmail, and then if blackmail doesn't work, murder.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look, also, who else they did that to? MLK. They remember how MLK, they were saying he was a womanizer and stuff like that. They were going to release that to the media, and he wouldn't stop with the civil rights campaign. And guess what happened? He also got shot. In a really suspicious circumstance, some lone racist out in Tennessee shot him. Whatever that guy's name was, I can't think of it.
James Earl Ray, who was subsequently, like, in a case, like, found not guilty. I think it was a civil suit. But yeah, that was just reeks of shenanigans.
Well, who in that civil case, the United States government was found guilty of MLK's murder. The United States government actually did have to pay money to the King family because of they were found guilty of murdering him in a civil trial. Nobody even knows. 10% of the country knows that only. and that was in 1999. And it's kind of funny how they waited now 31 years later. It didn't matter because at that point nobody cared. If they would have done that in 1970, yes, people might have been alert to what happened, but since it was so long after MLK's killing, that's when they'll release information, like the Gulf of Tonkin. When we found out that the incident that started the Vietnam War did not exist in 2013, we found that out. They officially admitted to it 49 years later. Nobody cared because it was so long after the fact. Most of the people that served in Vietnam and were serving after a lie, now most of them are dead now.
Yep, it becomes a moot issue. There's still JFK documents. I think it's for 2075. I think they boosted it to that it will not be released. Like pay stubs and the like for Oswald and who he would things that would reveal who he worked for and who signed his check. Just a ton of things. It's classified. National security. I don't know.
I saw this. My friend was telling me about this book where they said Oswald worked for the FBI was a true story. He was sent. But the reason why he was in Russia in the 50s was not because he was they tried to make it seem like he was this communist lover that he wanted to go to the Soviet Union because he was so infatuated with communism. No, it was because he was a secret agent. Then he came back from there. And then he was protecting, or he was working with the FBI, and then he found out about the plot was the story about killing JFK. They say Oswald tried to save JFK at the very end. He actually didn't want JFK to die, but he still. I think also the thing was that they didn't know they were going to kill him until it actually happened. Like they were there at Dealey Plaza. I think some people are saying abort, but then somebody actually shot and it happened. Like Oswald was trying. I think Oswald was saying abort, but everybody else did it anyways. All the other shooters, because remember there was multiple shooters there. I mean, the magic bullet says everything. That bullet that went through through Kennedy's neck, out through his neck, through his elbow, went through his elbow, went through his seat, and it hit. Governor Colony, it hit the governor of Texas in the back. I think it went through like both of his wrists and a thigh, and then it still landed on the floor. It somehow was able to go through all those limbs and go all through all that bone and that seat, and the bullet still wasn't back. Bullets don't do that. Everybody, bullets often don't. Even if I know it was a high-power sniper rifle, they say, but still. Usually if there was two people, it would definitely get lodged in the second person. I mean,
and the writer of that magic bullet theory is he really got rewarded greatly for that. It's one Arlen Specter out of my home state, Pennsylvania. I mean, he basically got a lifetime appointment to the Senate for that little tale. What a whopper that is. And the guy. The CIA doctor who basically was in charge of the psychological states to determine, what the psychological states of Jack Ruby, and I'm pretty sure Oswald was one Jolly and West, also Tim McVeigh's psychiatrist. A lot of that, to deem someone crazy or just have control of what the perceived mental state of these individuals are. Dr. Jolly and West.
Yeah. And also, remember also the story about Kennedy's brain went missing, remember, at the autopsy? Like, when they somehow they lost his brain, which would have been him, and that was the fatal shot, and somehow they lost the most vital piece of the whole autopsy.
Amazing.
I don't know.
Amazing. And then the pictures come out where you can see where they carved up the front to make it look like, they just did a really horrible job, making it look like the shot came from the back.
It's the point of no return and nobody can stop it. Malcolm Little when he knelt before Elijah Muhammad, the comet that killed the dinosaurs, changing the earth. They love to criticize, they always say